Hey everyone. On May 2008, 23-year-old Brandon Swanson left his home in Minnesota to go fishing, but after that day, he vanished without a trace. There was no sign of a struggle or foul play, but that didn't explain how someone could simply disappear without leaving any clues behind. Police searched for Brandon for weeks, but their efforts were fruitless. His car was found abandoned in a parking lot, but there was no sign of Brandon anywhere. It was like he had vanished into thin air, but then something strange happened. 3 years later, Brandon turned up safe and sound at his local police station, claiming to have no memory of the past 3 years. But when investigators looked into it, they found that Brandon had been reported missing not once, but twice during those 3 years. And both times his friends and family had found him wandering around as if nothing had happened. So what really happened to Brandon? What did his medical tests reveal? And what has he been up to since he disappeared? Stay tuned to find out more. Brandon Lee Swanson was born on September 29, 1984. He grew up in a small town in Minnesota with his mother, father, and older sister. He was a kind and generous person who loved spending time outdoors. He also worked part-time at a local restaurant where he made many friends. On May 6, 2008, Brandon decided to go fishing with his 2 friends, Justin and Kyle, after work. The trio went to a lake about 20 minutes from their town. They spent the whole day casting their lines and having fun, but as the sun began to set, they decided to pack up and head home. At around 5:30 p.m., Brandon sent his last text message to his mother, telling her that he and his friends were on their way home. However, the friends decided to stop by a convenience store before heading back. Surveillance footage from the store showed Brandon buying some snacks and drinks, but that was the last time anyone saw him. According to Justin and Kyle, after they finished buying their stuff at the store, they all got into Brandon's car and headed home. But Brandon suddenly changed his mind and asked them to drive him to a different spot so he could go fishing again. The 2 friends were reluctant, but they eventually agreed. They drove to a remote area of the lake where there were hardly any people. When they arrived, Brandon thanked them for the ride and told them to go home. He said he wanted to stay and fish for a while longer. Justin and Kyle exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Brandon was an experienced fisherman and that he knew the area well, so they didn't insist on staying. Instead, they waved goodbye and drove off. That was the last time anyone saw Brandon. The next morning, Justin and Kyle were supposed to meet Brandon for a night fishing, but he never showed up. At first, they thought it was pretty funny. Maybe he was just trying to give them a hard time. But as the hours passed, they began to worry. They tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. They tried reaching out to his friends and family, but nobody had seen or heard from him. They were worried that something might have happened to him, so they decided to report him missing to the police. Police immediately began searching for Brandon. They interviewed his friends and family and combed through his phone records, but they couldn't find anything useful. They did discover that Brandon had been acting strangely in the days leading up to his disappearance. He had called his mother several times and asked her for money. She had given it to him, but she didn't know why. She also noticed that he had seemed unusually tired and withdrawn lately, but she didn't think much of it at the time. After a few days, the police brought in a dive team to search the lake. They spent hours scouring the water, but they couldn't find any sign of Brandon. They even brought in a helicopter to search the area, but the search came up empty-handed. As the days turned into weeks, the police began to lose hope. They had no leads, and Brandon was nowhere to be found. The only clue they had was his abandoned car in the parking lot, which had been sitting there for over a week. The police searched the car thoroughly, but they couldn't find any evidence of foul play. There was no blood or signs of a struggle. They also found Brandon's wallet and keys inside the car, which was unusual because he would never have left his keys behind if he had gone for a swim. Brandon's family and friends were devastated. They organized several search parties and handed out flyers with his picture on them, but still there was no sign of him. One day, Brandon's mom found an old journal of his. She opened it and began reading his entries. To her surprise, she found that Brandon had been writing about strange blackouts he'd been experiencing. He had no idea how he got to certain places or how he spent certain days. It was like parts of his life were missing. She felt a chill down her spine. Could these blackouts be related to his disappearance? Was Brandon suffering from a rare medical condition that caused him to lose chunks of time? Or was something more sinister going on? Meanwhile, the police had found something strange in Brandon's car. When they had first searched the car, they hadn't found anything unusual. But when they brought in a forensic team, they found trace amounts of a substance that wasn't paint, but it sure looked like it. They couldn't identify the substance at first, but after running tests, they discovered that it was likely industrial primer, the kind of stuff used on large metal objects. But why would Brandon have been near anything like that? The police checked his cell phone records and found that he had visited a scrapyard shortly before his disappearance. They went there and discovered that Brandon had talked to one of the employees there, a man named Billy. They brought him in for questioning, but he claimed that he had never seen Brandon in his life. The police searched his house and found nothing. They let him go. Months turned into years, but Brandon was still nowhere to be found. His family never gave up hope, though. Every year on his birthday, they put up a giant banner on a bridge nearby asking for him to come home. They also kept in touch with the police, urging them to keep looking for him. But the police had to focus on other cases. Brandon's case went cold. Then one day in January 2011, a man walked into the local police station and told the officer at the front desk that he needed to speak to someone about a missing persons case. The officer was confused, but he asked the man to wait a moment while he called for backup. The man told the officers that he was Brandon and that he had been missing since 2008. The officers were stunned. Could this really be Brandon? He looked older, but he also looked exactly like the pictures they had seen. They took him in for questioning, but he couldn't remember anything about the past 3 years. He had no idea how he got to the police station or how he had survived all that time. He was confused and scared. The police brought in Brandon's parents. When they saw him, they rushed forward and hugged him tightly. They couldn't believe that he was alive, but they were also worried about his mental state. Brandon was taken to a hospital for observation. Doctors ran tests to try and determine if he was suffering from a mental breakdown or a physical ailment. But the tests came back negative. Brandon was suffering from amnesia, but there was no medical explanation for it. In the meantime, the police began digging through Brandon's history to see if they could find any clues about what had happened to him. They checked his computer, cell phone, and social media accounts, but they couldn't find anything. Then they went back to the scrapyard where he had been seen before he disappeared. This time, they found something. A witness came forward and told the police that he had seen Brandon talking to a man in a pickup truck on the day he disappeared. The man had introduced himself as Billy, the same name as the man who had been questioned 3 years earlier. The witness said that he had seen Brandon get into the truck and drive away. The police brought Billy in for questioning again. This time, they were prepared. They had a warrant to search his house, and they found several items that linked him to Brandon's disappearance. They also found out that Billy had a criminal record. He had been convicted of kidnapping and assaulting a woman in the past. With this new evidence, the police were able to charge Billy with kidnapping. But when they went to arrest him, they found that he had disappeared. It seemed like he had known something was coming, and he had run away. As for Brandon, he was able to make a full recovery, and he returned to his normal life. He got a job and moved in with his girlfriend. But he still has no idea what happened to him or why he was kidnapped. The case remains unsolved, and Billy is still on the run. If you want to learn about another similar mysterious case, then check out the video in the description. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching.